As I say, please feel free to film, take photos. We're going to come to you for questions as well in a little bit. Just to let you know, we have 3 of the 4 here. We're just waiting on Ken. He will join us the minute he gets here. But first of all, please join us in welcoming, please with a round of applause, Hayley Squires. Wow, that's quite a film. First, can I just say thank you for joining us on the night of your premiere. I know you're all dashing off straight from here to go off to Leicester Square, so unfortunately we can't keep you too long. So I'll start off with a couple of more questions, then I'll throw out, I'm sure people here have got questions. I would ask, when you ask your question, if you could let us know what you're from, which publication or which website, that would be very helpful for us. So Paul, if I could start from you, where did Daniel's story come from for you?
Well, I suppose lots of things fed into it. First of all, thanks for coming. It's always good to see you coming around and sticking around for the question and answers. There was lots of things that fed into Andy, but I suppose I think what really struck us was just the cruelty to some of our most vulnerable people. I suppose we found it kind of fascinating that some of the people who are sickest in our society, where it was outsourced, the assessment of these people was outsourced to an American multinational called Maximus. And I spoke to lots of doctors who told us about cases of their patients that were just mind-blowing. And another thing that struck us too was the great campaign against people on welfare. People, for example, on disability benefits, that found out that they suffer 6 times more than anyone else. And we just had a sense that there was tremendous abuse and frustration and anger that was going on under the surface. So we went along to a lot of food banks from the north of the country, up in Glasgow, right away down south, and we wanted to find out what people's lived experience was beyond the legislation, beyond the stereotypes. And we just heard remarkable stories of people choosing between eating their house and feeding themselves. We heard people just talking about the experience of hunger, what it felt like, what it was like on the 3rd day, how nauseous you felt, in the most casual fashion. We talked to parents who were feeding their children biscuits. In the year before the film, there were something like 1 million sanctions that took place. So that was 500 times the misery that was seen in Daniel Blake. And what was remarkable, we could have told a much tougher story. There was much more raw stories. But Daniel Blake and Katie Morgan are 2 bright, articulate people who, in many ways, their life is going quite well. They haven't got learning difficulties, they've got support, they've had, they're bright people. And so we thought that it was really worth trying to dig in and find a story that would touch on all of us.
Just at this juncture, please welcome Ken Loach.
I like to dominate you.
With your feet.
I don't know if my legs will be long enough.
Ken, welcome.
Okay. Sorry, I'm late.
Ken, welcome. A fantastic film. Paul, just sort of set this up for us. Can I ask you, why was sort of Newcastle Gateshead that area right for this story for you?
Well, we could have told the story anywhere. I guess Paul said we went. We started in my hometown, actually in Nuneaton in the Midlands, and we went the Midlands. We went west, northwest, northeast, Scotland, and we heard the same story everywhere. But Newcastle's got a rich culture. It's a city built on struggle. The old industries have died. Shipbuilding or been killed off. Shipbuilding, coal mines. So people have had a lot of hardship there, but it's also an area with a spirit of resistance. The dialect is made for comedy and as well as being a very sharp, interesting way of speaking. And there's also the city centre is appears quite affluent. So there's a sense of the poverty coexisting with affluence, which we thought other people outside that area might identify with. But it's a great place to work. The only downside was that Newcastle weren't doing so well in the football. But
Oh, the games we went to see 3 games were dreadful, weren't they?
Dave's a local. Is this a city you recognise?
What, Newcastle?
Well, this vision. Of
Yeah,
Newcastle.
well, I mean, it's coincidentally Biker, where we filmed a lot of the scenes, was was where I was brought up. So my mum used to take me on Shields Road, where we filmed some of Katie's scenes and that. So, but the Biker that I remember as a kid is a different Biker than it is now, because it was a very, close-knit working class community, social housing. There's none of that now. And people in Biker, they're trying to make it work, but it's quite a struggle for them. So yeah, it was quite interesting to be filming in areas where I was brought up as a kid. Yeah, but it's not the same now because of that working class sort of knitted community is gone now.
Hayley, Paul's already mentioned food banks. Obviously, one of the most harrowing scenes in this is the scene with Katie in the food bank. Could you just tell us a little bit about that scene and preparing for that, and how it was for you filming it, because the impact it has on an audience is really something.
The food bank that you see in the film is a real working food bank. It's the largest, or one of the largest in the country. And the women who come and help Katie, who help her with her shopping and then help her when she gets ill, are the women who work there, who volunteer there. And the majority, I think all of the people actually that you see in that scene, aside from myself, Dave and the 2 kids, have some connection with the food bank, be it they've used it or they've been in touch with it for support in one way or another. One thing, the food bank thing is so interesting because I think there's such a lack of education about it. I mean, it's a real shame that we have to have them in our country, the 5th richest economy in the world. The fact that we have food banks is just shocking. And it was at the heart of Paul's research when he was writing the script. In 2015, just shy of 500,000 children were fed via food banks, which I think is shocking when you really think about that number. So I went along to the food bank about 2 or 3 days before we shot the scene, and it was probably the hardest part of the research because there's such a fragility to, as an adult, when you've reached the point that you're not able to feed yourself and a doctor or a social worker refers you to a food bank so you can go and get a 3-day emergency supply. It's such a loss of dignity. A lot of the people that I met, it felt like a loss of dignity, and they were bright people. I spoke with a woman who had a master's degree in biochemistry. Very, very bright woman who'd had a couple of mishaps in her life and wasn't able to get back on her feet. So it was very fragile, and then I came back and spoke to Ken about the fact that it was very fragile, very delicate. And then prior to shooting it, about 4 days before shooting it, I went on a kind of semi-fast. I mean, I like my food too much. So I was eating kind of small bowls of soup. And Ken and I spoke about the fact that it wasn't so much about the physical weight loss in a kind of, Christian Bale Fassbender way, but more about what that does to you mentally. Because if you haven't eaten properly for 4 days, it means you haven't slept properly, and it means you're dealing with a tremendous amount of stress. And then when you get a kick of adrenaline, when Katie has to do what she does, it sends an adrenaline through your body that puts the emotion on the surface. So I think it's very important to say that that what happens to Katie in the film happened to a woman that Paul met in his research. And I think it's always important to say there was a woman earlier on who was a journalist who came and did an interview with us, and we only found out after, Ken, didn't we, that she'd made a comment about the fact that, it was over the top. The moments happening in this film are over the top. And what I love is that I can say, no, each of these key moments happened to both Daniel and Katie, happened to people that Paul met during his research. And it's important to say that, I think.
Absolutely. Let's throw it open to some questions. Darryl?
Question in the back for Paul and Ken. I saw in the acknowledgements at the end a thank you to the Department of Work and Pensions. People working within it must remain anonymous. Are the people working within the system pulling their hair out?
Thanks very much for that question. I'm really glad you picked that out because we're very, very keen not to demonise, workers within the Department of Work and Pensions. And it's a terrific question because, you know, there's a systematic bullying against the people who work inside the Department of Work and Pensions too. So the information that we got from these whistleblowers was absolutely key, because what you see is a propaganda and a facade about what is happening, that it's reasonable and everything is taking place, but it's the nitty-gritty inside that you've got to find out about. And just to give you one example, one worker showed me his name, the name of all his fellow colleagues, and the number of sanctions that carried out that month, with a letter from the area manager saying only the top 3 had carried out enough sanctions, and if they didn't, you know, up their game, they were going to face something called a PIP, which is their speak for a personal improvement plan. And I actually met one guy who was put in a personal improvement plan, was fired and ended up in a food bank himself. And it was very interesting talking to the older workers too, and many of the people who were who played the part in the Department of Work and Pensions in the film were ex-workers. And many of them said how the system had changed. You know, some had been civil servants for 30 years, and they were embarrassed and ashamed about what management was making them do to the public. They're obsessed with the idea of footfall, they call it. They've all got a vocabulary for everything. Footfall. Footfall means human beings coming in, trying to get their rights and sign on. So there's a systematic campaign against the workers. There's people who are involved in the trade union all said that if you become active and involved, you will not get promotion. And you could see how the whole tide in the politics had changed within the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, just one simple thing just illustrates that absolutely. Some years back, people, if you went to a job centre, the person interviewing you could show you the jobs that you might be able to get, show you the jobs that were available. Now they are not allowed to show you the jobs. They'll have the information on their screen. They can't actually turn the screen round and say, "Why didn't you try for that?" And that epitomises the attitude. We're not here to help you. We're here to punish you. And that's what's his name? The wee baldy, what's his name? That was his aim. That was his aim. Punishment, not support.
A question from the chap on the end.
I just want to say thank you for a very important movie, because about 2 years ago I went through job seekers and stuff like that, so I know exactly how honest it can be, so thank you. Given the Food for London campaign that the Evening Standard is doing at the moment, do you think, is there going to be an initiative to actually use this film as a springboard to actually more, I mean, is the people going to be in aid of something like that tonight?
Interestingly, E1, the distributors, have been terrific about this. And once the film's been in the cinemas for a week or two, it'll be available on a DVD or some way of communities getting it and showing it at a very low cost, and to use as either a fundraiser or just to invite people, and to do it in the communities that wouldn't come to the cinemas, probably wouldn't go to an art house cinema. So there is a real determination that people can see it in a community organisation can ring up someone at E1, I'll give you their name later, and Ben Metcalf, a fine young man. He's waiting for your call at E1, and he'll make sure, if you want to show it, you can show it, room above a pub, football club, bar, community centre, whatever, and just get people to rally round and use it, absolutely use it.
Absolutely. Katie, Dave, thank you so much. Your performance was just fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll be sure to get Ben's details, and then if anyone needs them from E1, you can get them from Kate or from the FDA as well. The gentleman there had a question.
All right. Well, my name is Victor Fraga from D Movies. Well, I'd like to ask Ken. Well, we've got a new Prime Minister, and obviously a lot has changed in the past few months. Your film was finished long before all of that happened, and I get the impression that the rhetoric is becoming increasingly rabid against benefit seekers. Theresa May said something, perhaps not those words, but something to that effect. if you're milking the system, we're coming to get you. She did say we're coming to get you. Something very remarkably similar to that. So do you think in the near future, the next year or two, we're going to see even less dignity and less self-respect?
Well, I think it's a really important question. I think economics drives this. And we know that with leaving the European Union, there will probably be a dip in economic activity. So this means that there will be either more unemployment or lower wages. I mean, it seems that they will try to attract more investment by making the workforce even more easy to exploit. So this means probably both lower wages and people more vulnerable. In that situation, they will have to try to cut down the numbers receiving benefits or welfare or social security. So yes, that means the policies will continue. I mean, it seems to me, this may be, people may feel this is going too far, but you know, hell, when you get old, you don't care really. And I think we're at a very important moment politically. I think you have the far right on the march, and we've seen the right-wing parties gather in strength. But I think there is an opportunity within the Labour movement that there is a leadership that will support working-class people. I think he will act, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell and those with them, they will act to limit the intrusion to cut back the power of big business. They will abolish the assessments. They will look again at sanctions, which actually need to go entirely. And they will, the main thing is they will invest in work. And that's the key to everything, seems to me, is when people have work, when they have a job that will sustain them and their family, when they can get a house and plan the future, then a lot of the tensions in society dissipate because people are secure. And when people are strong, then they're generous. You know, a lot of this issue of immigrants and the hostility and the examples of racism and so on come when people feel threatened and vulnerable and weak. When people are strong, they can be generous.
Yeah.
And I think we need to reinvest in proper work, proper jobs in the areas that have been hardest hit. Jeremy Corbyn has said that's their programme. I think we have to build a big social movement to give them the strength to implement that. It's a moment, it's the first time in my lifetime there's been a socialist as leader of the Labour Party. Even Clement Attlee sent in troops to break strikes. So it's an extraordinary moment. It may not last. And that's why he's getting such hostility from across the press and the broadcasting, the BBC and everyone. It's an extraordinary moment, but I think we have to seize it.
Can I just add something very specific in relation to your question? It's a very good question too, because you know the rhetoric has changed, and you know it was almost like a mantra when Ken and myself were talking about this, and Hayley and Dave. I mean, one thing that attracted attention was this great narrative of the skiver versus the striver, and we've talked about it regularly. And now Theresa May said we've had enough of this rhetoric. No more skiver versus striver. I think it's very easy. It's a wee bit like Margaret Thatcher talking about the St Francis prayer outside 10 Downing Street. We'll all remember that. Yeah. But if she really, really means that, she'll do practical things that will end up the misery for hundreds of thousands of people. The first thing would be is to end the connection with assessments with the American multinational that we mentioned previously. They will end the bedroom tax and will stop sanctions. And if you did that, then there might be some strength to the change of tone. But I think we'll wait a long time before we see those changes.
Thank you. Stuart.
Hi. Can't speak for the rest of the audience, but I sat here feeling quite angry through that movie. I've actually seen people I know in that situation. How did you manage to keep the anger out of your performances and out of the film? There's a lot of frustration in there, but no one seemed to get angry.
I'm glad you're angry. This is something that we spoke about earlier on today. I think anger is a brilliant energy. I think it's one that can be quite dangerous if it's in the wrong hands or it's not handled correctly or people don't know how to challenge it. But I think that anger is a brilliant energy. The women that I met when I was researching before we started shooting, they were young, single mums, very educated, very, very bright, who, for one reason or another, be it a revenge eviction by their private landlord, or the fact that one of them fell pregnant and they had to leave their mum's house, otherwise it would have been deemed overcrowding, and found themselves in in one room with their children, trying to bring them up as they searched for housing. They were furious, and it was the only energy that actually got them through the day. It was the only way that they were able to stop from breaking down or giving up. In terms of keeping anger out of the performance, I don't know. I think it was because we were guided. It was very specific as to what Paul had written, and it was very specific in terms of Ken's direction and guidance. But the film has been made. Paul wrote the film because of anger, and because of the absurdity of it. But ultimately, anger, it makes your blood boil, and that's what made him write it, and not stop thinking
I think
about
it's
it.
the frustration as an audience that you would see, that like I'm a big believer, and I've said it before, that the way the two characters are written, that ordinary people could be your sister, your daughter, Dan could be your grandfather, and I think that's what gets the audience angry, is seeing that it's ordinary, decent people. It could be any of us, 3 paychecks, or an illness, and we'd all be in the same boat. And I think that's probably where the audience get their anger from. That sort of feeling of wrongdoing and injustice. And there's been so much, I think, where people have been told that it's, everybody who, even they've changed it was interesting, somebody was saying the other day, and I never thought about it, but they've even changed, when I was going for help years ago, it was called Social Security. It's even changed now to welfare and the benefit, which gives it that negative connotation that it's a handout, when it's supposed to be a safety net. So I do think there is anger there, but I think it's sort of under the surface with Dan, because he thinks he's going to be helped. All the way along he thinks, this is going to work out. And Dan uses his humour, I think, to get by. And I think his sense of anger is where he thinks, I've got to do something. So he does the graffiti on the walls, and that's his sense of anger, I think, rather than a violent, thing.
And I think the thing to say, sorry, just the last point, is that anger, if it's organised, can be really powerful and really effective.
Question from the lady in the centre there.
Hello, Amani from BBC Surrey.
Hello.
Hello, man.
How you
Is
doing?
that
All
an
right.
interview? Yeah, it was a very nice interview, thank you.
I had to see the movie again. You inspired me, actually, so that's what you can. I had to come back and watch it again. And actually, I think in Cannes I was just in shock and felt very numb. And I feel that this time around I watched it from a more personal point of view. My parents have been affected by this. I filled out numerous forms for my dad. All kinds of shocking things, exactly what Daniel goes through in the film. He's not well, but you can't breathe it. How do you breathe it? All that stuff. But my question to you, because for me, I think the tone of the film is absolutely spectacular, because it does touch on the very negative, the very kind of dark side of everything. This whole kind of society that we live in, kind of all shrugging our shoulders, turning our backs. I think silence is very dangerous. It's almost like we're kept in fear in order for people that understand the system to kind of take over. And so my question to you as a writer, Paul, and a director, Ken, was how did you get that tone right, the balance of the humour, the humanity of the film, but also, putting those details forward, the important facts, really, if you like, of a very big crisis, I think, that we're currently in.
You're dead right. There is there's something that Paul and I both talked about, and Paul confronted really, is there's a morass of detail, and the moment you start doing this research and you speak to experts rather than just people going through it, the detail is overwhelming. So the there had to be some choices early on about who were the central characters, what was their situation, and hope that by telling one or two stories quite precisely, that you infer the rest. Because to deal with, you can make a documentary about all the detail, but you drown in it. And then Paul wrote the two characters, and I think it's something we've both found in living normally, is that comedy, you can't take comedy out of the situation, because that's what people are. When people are at work, or when they're living in the community, there's comedy. There's go on any building site around London, there'll be somebody who's in trouble with their missus or some partner, or there'll be somebody who's mean, there'll be somebody who's always late, there'll be somebody who, I don't know, got this complaint or that complaint, and the characters build up, and people make jokes about each other, and it's part of how we live, and it's how you get through tough times. So to take it out would be the unrealistic thing. It's just, and it's central to Paul's writing and our experience, I think.
And no, I agree with all that. And just one other technical point too. I think we sometimes underestimate just how much empathy there is with people. There's great kindness. When you go around to the food banks, many of the people who are around the food banks are actually appalled about the need for food banks. They think it's absolutely despicable. They don't want people to survive in charity. They should have their rights. But people are hungry. Children are going hungry. People's lives are devastated. Their health is falling. So you see people say, right, I'm just going to hand it in and I'm going to put in a few hours. Or the neighbours or people who give welfare advice. Some of the DWP advisors who can no longer stand the job are now on the other side giving advice from the inside. So I think you see cruel systems, but it's subverted by people's decency and people's empathy. And so that's always inspiring, and I think we should never lose hope from that as well.
I think the thing that scene in the food bank, the thing that I think, thinking about it, that moved me the most was the thing about Katie when she goes shoplifting and she doesn't, she pays for the food and the things for the kids, but she steals, razors and deodorant and sanitary products for herself, because she can't get a hold of those things. And that must be, for a woman, that must be so sort of, demeaning to have to do something like that, And I think those little tiny things is what makes it, dehumanises it, I think. That sort of total disregard for just Katie being what everybody, other woman would take for granted. She couldn't,
We could sit here and talk for hours. I'm afraid you have a premiere to get to, so we have to let you go. Please join me in thanking our guests.
Thank
Paul,
you.
Ken.